Detours. Brought to you by Sports and Spokes, the magazine for wheelchair sports and recreation. Dominant is a word that gets tossed around a lot in the world of sports. In the case of Aussie David Hall, not only does it apply, it may not even be strong enough. Over the course of his 13-year pro tennis career, Hall won every single major on the circuit, including the Australian Open 9 times and the U.S. Open 8 times. He amassed a singles record of 632 wins to 111 losses and battled his way to 6 Paralympic medals. But of all the honors the Tennis Hall of Famers received, Hall holds extreme pride for the Paralympic gold he earned in front of his hometown fans at the Games in Sydney 2000. Welcome, David. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm really well, man. Hey, boy, so many times we talk about people who are legendary in a sport, but you really helped to transition and make the game something better than it ever was when you came into it in the 90s.
Yeah, thanks for that. I think my coach, Rich Berman, was the main catalyst for that. I think I was traveling along like on the tour and I was playing, yeah, guys like, Randy Snow, Laurent Giamatini, Mick Connell, like the top echelon of players. And then what happened, I started dating a girl that lived in Boulder, Colorado. And I had to find a tennis coach in Boulder and started working with Rich. And I was like, I think as a player, I kind of knew the right path that I wanted to go down, but it was like a little bit dark, and I couldn't quite see the way. And Rich, as a coach, he taught me how to be a true professional. And he kind of, I guess you could say, came along with a flashlight and then just showed me, the right way down the path. And I think that was just kind of rejigging, my training routine, changing my technique a little. And he really wanted me to prove how serious I was in becoming world number one. Because when we started working together, like I'd risen to number 2 in the world, but I wanted to be, world number 1, just like, Randy Snow was, just like Laurent Giamatini was, I wanted to be at that level. So yeah, I think the fact that Rich came along at just the right time, and I knew exactly what I wanted. I wanted to win the US Open more than anything itself.
What what was it that he shed the light on? I mean, were there some really specific aspects of your game physically? Were there aspects of your game mentally? What was it that he felt was the shortcoming and how'd you overcome that?
Well, it was interesting because at the time, I'd lost a couple of finals to Stevie Welsh, and I was at a point in my career that I think I'd kind of reached the ceiling. Like I think I had technical holes in my game that needed fixing, and I think those couple of losses in the summer of '95 really showed me that I needed to fix. But I think at the time it was primarily my serve. Like I had a bit of a hitch in my serve, and my toss was in a certain position, and Rich kind of, we decided to change that like only weeks before the US Open
Well,
at the
that's
Racket
not
Club
much
of Irvine.
time.
No, it's not, man, and that's the thing. Like normally you do a big technical change in the off season, like it'd take months. But because I'd been having these losses to Welch, Rich, we got together and kind of hatched a plan that we would rejig this serve, but also start taking more rallies on one bounce instead of two, and so to kind of up the aggression in that respect, and I just
Undoubtedly.
started lifting.
Hey, David, let me jump in really quick. You keep referring to a Rich. Was he can you tell us just quickly a little bit more about him? Was he a tennis coach? Had he already worked with other chair players?
Yeah, he was a tennis coach and he had worked with a few local wheelchair players in Boulder, but they weren't at my level. Like they were primarily local players that were playing, some tournaments in the US. But I was on the world circuit, traveling around 6, 7, 8 months a year, playing wheelchair tennis as a profession. So I think he could see that I had a lot of potential, but I wasn't actually maximizing that to the best of my ability. So Rich he was a good college player, and then went into coaching, along the way. But he didn't do things in a more traditional sense. Like he had certification from the US coaching fraternity, but Rich was always questioning, what worked and what didn't. And he would have contraptions on the side of the court, like homemade stuff to kind of put on players, like in plastic and metal, and some of them even looked homemade, to kind of fix their technique. And he would film all these students and like watch the footage back on. He had a TV set up like on the side of the court, and so he'd film the students, watch the footage, and then he'd go through the footage with the student. And for a lot of those lessons, we wouldn't even hit balls. Like we would just talk, watch footage, and then maybe go back out on court, do some corrections. So yeah, Rich was, I think, a little bit unique in terms of tennis coaching.
Yeah, it sounds to me like, I hate to use the term thinking outside the box because it's used so much, but he was. It sounded like he did some revolutionary things. Well, whatever it was, it certainly worked because, man, you came on strong. I think the first time I ran into you was probably 95, 96, maybe in Irvine, and you were already on the rise. So what I saw from the years previous to you coming up to you is that you really changed a lot about the speed of the game. Well, you and Stevie Welch, I mean, for essentially you guys were moving. So I mean, no offense to the Randy Snows of the world, they were great in their era, but man, you guys worked the court. I mean, you worked every inch of the court.
Well, that was the thing. I think you are only kind of limited by what you think you can accomplish. And I was watching these guys, and at first, you kind of think, well, how will I ever get to that level? But then as the years tick over and you play these guys more and more, and you get that kind of base of matches, underneath you, then you kind of work out, what works and what doesn't. And I think with like Rich's help, I was able to kind of fix those technical holes. But I knew with Stevie, especially, like physically, the guy, he was a beast, and you could barely get the ball past the guy. I mean, he was the
At everything he touched, basketball, whatever.
oh,
Give him a ball,
exactly.
he could do it.
Yeah. Yeah, he was multi-talented. I mean, the guy would play the piano in hotel bars and, entertain, the guests. I mean, the guy was a multi-talented
That's
multi-talented
just
rooster.
crazy. Yeah.
I remember his mum would ring a cowbell at matches, like, every time he won a point, and so, she's ringing that thing like she's dancing with Travolta or something. It was
Uh,
she was quite entertaining.
that
But
that didn't annoy you or anything, did it?
oh, man, you had to put that out of your head, you know? Like, otherwise, yeah, it would just do your head in.
Uh,
Um, but Steve was such a beast, like, I knew physically I had to match him, and I think that was what great players do. Like, they force you into uncomfortable areas, and I think Randy did it, Laurent did it, Mick Connell did it, Stevie did it, and then, later on it was Ricky Moyer did it, Kai Schrameyer did it, Amalan did it. I mean, all these guys kind of force you into places that you have to go to kind of match them or at least try to, stay ahead.
Absolutely. Hey, Hey, David, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the Paralympics. So in 96, Atlanta, you come away with the bronze. Ricky Mollier, who you just mentioned, he comes away with the gold. In 2000, you pick up the gold over Stevie Welch. And then in 2004, you lose to Robin Amerlon and come away with the silver. All great medals, but undoubtedly the medal you're most proud of is that gold from Sydney.
Yeah, that's true, and I knew I'd never get that chance ever again, to play a Paralympics at home. Like, I knew that was gonna be a once off, in my tennis career, so I think the pressure was on, and I realized that at that point in my career, I'd been on the tour for 10 years, but it was announced in '93 that Sydney was gonna hold the Olympics and the Paralympics, so I had that kind of percolating in my brain for 7 years, and man, that's a long time to kind of imagine yourself, at that moment. What's the game gonna be like in 2000? Am I still gonna be at the top or near the top, and what's the level of competition gonna be like? And as the years kinda ticked over, new players emerged, some players retired, but it was almost like Sydney was a merging of generations landing in Sydney for those 2 weeks. Like, you still had Randy playing, you still had Laurent playing, you had Mick Connell, you had, wow, Randy, Snow, Laurent Giammattini, you had Robin Amelan, you had all these, fantastic, great players, and you kind of realize that, man, this is gonna be, you know, uh, like a massive, massive event. And just the lead up, I think, into the games with the level of publicity and people on the streets kind of asking me, where do I get tickets and all that kind of stuff. And then when the games began, you just realize that you got to perform. And I remember going out there for that first match. It was against Andreas Westman from Sweden, and it was just a random, just another day in Sydney, but the stadium was like 3/4 full, and it was I mean, that's like 8,000 people, and which was, probably at the time, the most people that have ever actually been at a wheelchair tennis match. And then as the 2 weeks went on and I kept winning, I just kept thinking that, I just have to perform at the right moments. And throughout all those matches, I don't think I even played my best tennis, but I was able just to deal with the moment, as it presented itself. And then to be in that gold medal match with Steve, with the 10,000 people in that stadium, trying to keep my mind off that, the gold medal is potentially, a set away or games away, and just trying to stay in the moment, throughout that match, and that knowing that Stevie is an alpha and that he's not going to go away or disappear at any part of that match, and then to finally win that on match point, I just couldn't believe it. It
Yeah.
was
Hey.
like shock,
Oh,
disbelief,
oh no.
joy.
I've seen it, David. I watched a couple of things online, and let's run through that gold medal match. So Stevie opens with a win, 6-7. So you guys duked it out right away. First set. Did that get in your head?
Well, I remember that he went out to 4-1 in that first set, and I fought back and dragged that set to a tiebreak. And at the time, I was thinking, I've done well to get this to a breaker, because he had started so well. He almost started the match like an imposter. So we'd played each other, I think up to that point, it was something like 35 times. It was a ridiculous amount of matches because we developed this massive rivalry, and so we knew each other's game so
Out of
well.
the
But
30, out of the 35, David, was it pretty split? Was it kind of even?
it
Did
was
one of you guys?
close. Yeah,
Okay.
it was
All right.
close, and it was interesting because I knew what pretty much, Steve knew my game, I knew his game, and Steve would just kind of serve. He wouldn't really go big on the serve. Like, he'd serve kickers and then try to maneuver the ball around in the rally, use his speed to track down balls, waiting for you to screw up. I mean, that was basically, his. gameplay. And he had a great, yeah, he had a great shot. It was probably his best shot, the reverse topspin backhand, which is a shot that's everywhere now in wheelchair tennis. But that Stevie didn't start the gold medal match. Another Stevie, he went big on the serves. Like he tried to hit, forehands, big topspin forehands, big topspin backhands to the corners. And I was like, man, who is this guy? He's got his own tactics. I have my own tactics. He had his own tactics. Race to 4-1. I kind of drag it to a tie break, and then I make just a pile of mistakes in the breaker. So he wins the first set. And I remember for a lot of my career, I would write notes and just leave the note in my tennis bag. And it was like a combination of, technical and tactical reminders. And some of them were like, you are a warrior, or, never give in, or something like that. And I remember after that first set, losing it, going to that bag, looking at the note, never give in. I mean, I needed like an emotional, sometimes you need a technical reminder. Like I needed like an emotional jolt.
Yep.
And I just remember that. And of course, there's 10,000 people in the stadium. I'd say 75% of them are for me. So I was trying to feed off that energy as well.
Well, and, undoubtedly you did. So you come back, you go 2 straight wins, and, you win, the next, set 6-4 and then 6-2, and I can still sorta picture, that moment when the final ball went wide, and there you were. You peeled your hat off, you dropped your racket to the ground. Did you cry, David?
Oh, I did. Yeah. I couldn't, as I said, I just couldn't believe it. It was like this thing that you've been thinking about it for 7 years. You've been dreaming about it. You've got all these, countrymen in the stadium. You've got your parents there. You've got, uncles, aunties, friends from school. My girlfriend. You've got all these people that care about you, and especially to do it at home. And it's almost like you dare not dream about it, because it's almost like, it could almost feel too good, if it happens. You just almost, being an athlete is a weird thing, because, you don't wanna propel your mind forward because you wanna concentrate, on the moment. But because, this thing was 7 years in the making, like, how can you not think about it, at different times? And then when you're in the heat of battle, and you're trying to, navigate forehands, backhands, the crowd, disappointment at missing a shot, feeling good that you've hit a winner or whatever it is. And all of a sudden you find yourself at match point, and you think, man, this thing is like potentially seconds away. And then, yeah, when I saw that ball land out, it's like everything just released out of me. Like all that emotion, all that anticipation and joy, and it was like a release of everything. And I think, yeah, that's when the tears, started to flow. And I remember, later on someone told me that Randy Snow was doing, commentary for the worldwide feed,
Ah,
and he
nice.
very cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And he said a line, he said, "Oh, he's broken down in his hometown." And man, I had, because the tears were just kind of coming out of me, and I saw Stevie at the net, and I just remember thinking, I can't leave him hanging. Like, I have to, go up there, and we didn't even say anything. We just kinda hugged each other.
Right.
There was just nothing, there was nothing to say, you
Yeah,
know?
no, this was, undoubtedly a moment of respect.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
There's so much that we could talk about with, all the matches you played and how many years you played. So 2004, you come Robin Amerlon takes, the gold and you get the silver. Did you stop at that point? Was it just did you know something instinctually that this was enough, that you had accomplished what you needed to accomplish and you were done?
Well, it's interesting. Like, to be honest, I hated that silver. Hated it. I wanted one medal, and it was gold, and I didn't get it. And I think that was as well like a bit of a mental shift, for me, because I mean, I was 34 by then. I'd been on tour for 14 years. I'd had a lot of matches under me. My body had obviously suffered a lot being a professional athlete for that
No
long.
doubt.
I was in physio a lot. By that stage, I was getting cortisone needles.
Shoulders.
Yeah. Shoulders, neck. I had neck issues. And so I was kind of, I was on the back end really, like of my career, but it was almost like the disappointment of that silver. It kind of spurred me on almost as well. So I had disappointment, but also knew that I had to change, parts of my game to kind of, because at that stage, and this is how rivalries go. You might beat a guy 4 or 5 times, and then he'll change something, and then he'll beat you 4 or 5 times, and it's like a swing. And so I knew Robin at that point had beaten me, I think it was 5 times in a row. And so I went back to Rich, back to Boulder, and we worked out a plan. And so I shifted my game and then beat Robin, a few times after that. But my goal was to finish number 1 in that season, 2004. So I was able to do that. So that was a great way to end like a disappointing Athens experience. But yeah, 2005, I could feel playing on the tour that season that it was hard to get up for matches. Like not the
Undoubtedly.
majors, like the Australian Open, US Open, but like as the season went on, I could feel emotionally and mentally I was really forcing the desire. And I kind of realized that, after I lost at the US Open to Shingo in San Diego, and that was it. I knew I was done. Like all the emotion, all the will and the desire to play wheelchair tennis had just drained out of me. And I played a doubles tournament in Italy a few weeks after that. And then I never played another wheelchair tennis tournament again. And I was done.
We'd like to take a minute to thank our sponsor, Sports and Spokes Magazine. For nearly 50 years, they've produced stories on iconic athletes performing at the top of their game, given generational coverage of sports dating back to the 1970s, and they've shown the way with exciting and timeless magazine cover shots. To stay on top of all the latest news from the world of high performance adaptive sports, go to sportsandspokes.com. Sports and Spokes, the magazine for wheelchair sports and recreation. Boy, there's just so much we could truly go on about, but I'm curious now. So 2005, so here we are 20 years later. As you look at wheelchair tennis, not only from a Paralympic standpoint, but from a health standpoint, is the sport where you hoped it would be? Has it grown? Has it grown to a point of higher success? Do you like where the game is at 20 years later?
I do. I do like where the game is at. And I think it's gone where I thought it was going to go. Like I knew as
Where
soon as,
where you thought the potential was?
exactly. And I thought as soon as wheelchair tennis got into the Grand Slams, the Australian Open was the first to do it in 2002. I realized once that became embedded, and that's the thing with the Grand Slams, once one slam does something, not even with wheelchair tennis, like with other aspects of a Grand Slam, a lot of the other slams will just copy it because they don't want to get, left behind.
Left behind.
Yeah. And so once the Australian Open did it, then I knew the other slams over time would follow suit. And sure enough, they all did. And that was, I think, the catalyst that once you become embedded in a slam, it's only going to grow and grow because every aspect of a slam just gets bigger and bigger. There's more entertainment, there's more prize money, there's more exposure for wheelchair tennis. And as those seasons ticked over, the prize money grew and grew for the wheelchair tennis guys and girls, and the draw sizes grew and grew. And so I knew from that that, the sport is just gonna continue to grow. Now the issue with that is that anything that starts, shooting up through the ceiling, the middle ground potentially can get left behind. And I think that was wherever the game is now in terms of numbers, I'm not sure, exactly where it is, but I just remember through the 80s, 90s, and noughties, like there was a great base, to work from. Man, there were so many recreational local players, and that from that base, guys could elevate up to the middle tier, and then they could up up that again to become full-time professionals because prize money was, slowly coming into it. But there was never a void. Like, there was never a void in the middle, and so I think now the concern is because the top end is so healthy that they've almost become a little bit separate from, the middle tier and the recreational, and I think that was the beauty of, the '80s, '90s, and part of the noughties was, like, everyone was together, and so you could hang out with Randy Snow at lunch and talk to him about whatever,
I
and
mean, this is a legend.
I know. Yeah, and I'm just I mean, I remember the first time I met Randy was in Japan in this is gonna sound weird, it was in a communal bathhouse. And so, we're at the tournament hotel, and I'm in the bath with, like, 4 Japanese men, that look like they could put their teeth on a bedside table, and through the steam, Randy Snow wheels in, and we'd never met. But all the other Aussie guys had told me about, this mythical Randy Snow. He's number 1 in the world. All of a sudden, I see him emerge through the steam. I'm thinking, "Oh my god, that's Randy Snow." And so, we start chatting, and he knew who I was because the Aussie guys had, told him, about me. And so, I think he said something like, "Oh, man, I hope we get a chance to play this week." And I'm thinking, "Man, that'd be great, but I'm not even gonna win a point, from you." And the crazy thing was that we did actually play that tournament. Somehow I made the semis, I don't know how, and all I could think was, "Heck, man, I'm playing Randy Snow." I couldn't believe it. But I would never have had that, experience if at that point, all the top echelon of guys were only playing the slams or were only playing, the ATP, Master Series events or whatever it was. And so I think that was the beauty of, having that massive mixture of professionals, semi-professionals, recreational players, all kind of mixed in. And I think in a way, it's kind of, it's kind of a shame that that's not the case now.
Right. No, I get it. Hey, David, I saw a really good picture of you and Esther Vergeer as you were both going into the Hall of Fame simultaneously at the same year. What kind of, we're talking about a legend once again. I mean, Esther, geez, you look at her record, it's just astounding. Um, Sitting there having that opportunity to talk with Esther and hang out with her a little bit, what were those conversations like while you guys were getting ready to get inducted into the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, it was interesting. Well, I actually I went into the Hall of Fame a few years before Esther did, but her career, like when you think about it, like the actual process that she went through to get to her level, like I think that was the incredible thing that the run that she went on of winning so many matches and not actually having a defeat for so many years, was incredible that she was able to take, the women's game and like wheelchair tennis in general to such a, high level. And I think that was the great thing that, once the International Tennis Hall of Fame started putting wheelchair players like into that hallowed club, you kind of felt like that, wheelchair tennis in a lot of ways has jumped again, in terms of recognition and like where it was going as a fully fledged elite professional sport.
Hey, David, let me jump in really quick because you brought up a good point. So, How do you think and why do you think that tennis so honorably segued its way into the able-bodied condition? I mean, there's so many other worlds like, basketball is still basketball. I mean, it's wheelchair basketball. How did tennis find its way into integration, and how did you guys grow to be so accepted in the majors, just worldwide?
Yeah, look, I think Brad Parks had a lot to do with it. I think I mean, like in Australia, we've got Professor Graham Watts, who was like uh, he was a professor at a local college here in Australia, in a Sydney suburb called Lidcombe, and wheelchair guys started to practice like at that college, back in the mid '80s, and those kind of things I think were happening in different countries around the world, and so I think the growth of the sport was like organically growing, and Brad and the professor and other administrators in different countries realized that, like, with this growth, we need to kind of make it more professional, and because that was where the game was going, but also to kind of create this tour that needed a framework, needed a structure, and I think that was where the International Tennis Federation came into it. And once they came into it, being it like the worldwide governing body of tennis, then I think wheelchair tennis married up with tennis, and I think it was just a natural fit. And I think once that structure was in place, then the sport could truly grow. And once the sport started to grow, and I think the Lipton in Miami, I think 1990 was the first year. That was the first integration of an ATP event with wheelchair tennis. And so I think once that happened, then that kind of, the crumbs were there that, like, over the years that, potentially other professional tournaments could pick it up. So you kind of had this perfect marriage of, we've got tennis with its structure of professional events and the slams, then you've got wheelchair tennis with its structure of, their worldwide tour happening. Let's kind of marry them up, and it just seemed to be, a perfect natural fit. And I think with a lot of other sports, like the framework of whatever it is, yeah, whether it's basketball or whatever, it just can't, the marriage just can't happen,
I
for
understand.
whatever reason.
Right, right. No, I know racing almost got there and then it kind of didn't, but you're right. I mean, obviously, no matter how good a wheelchair basketball player is, he's never gonna play with LeBron James.
Yeah, that's it. And I think, it's tricky because I think that's just the way, different able-bodied sports are. Like you can't, I guess there's not many sports that, I guess tennis has a week event or a 2-week event. And within that, you can have the top players from wheelchair tennis come into that 1-week event or 2-week event, the last couple of days of the event, the last 3 days, 4 days of the event, and showcase the best of wheelchair tennis into that able-bodied event. And I think it just brings, value to that event. And I think, that's what it's all about. Because I mean, the slams aren't going to have, wheelchair tennis at their tournaments if they don't think that they're not bringing something, to their event. And there's so many different aspects of a grand slam, but I think, I mean, that's the thing. I remember playing Armelan in 2002 at the Australian Open on a backcourt. You got Rod Laver Arena, and then you've got, all the backcourts, next door to that. I remember, people at first were curious about, me and Robin kind of smoking balls to the corners. And then they were like, man, watching tennis, we've might not have seen that before, but that was when the Paralympics in Sydney were only 2 years before that. So that was a big uptick in coverage. And then you get a whole lot of tennis fans in Melbourne seeing me and Robin, playing at a high level, and then those fans would start to build and build and build. And I think some of those people would come back the following year thinking, is Robin playing on a backcourt somewhere? Let's go check him out. Or is David playing on a backcourt? Let's go and check him out. Or Danny DeToro, or later on Esther Vigier, or whoever it is. And I think the fans kind of could relate to different players and want to come back the following year to check them out, which I think was really, really cool. And as the years went on, the slams started going, we're not going to put Esther Vigier on court 18. We're going to start putting her on a show court. And then all of a sudden we're going to put her on the main court, the center court. So I think that's another big advantage that wheelchair tennis has had, that just year after year the courts have become bigger and bigger at the slams, which is great.
So, David, what are you working on now? Are you doing anything with any of the youth programs or anything there in Australia that we might be of interest in?
Well, the crazy thing is, after I retired, I was sitting on the couch, and my athlete body was ballooning out. And John Newcomb rang me, and he said, "Dave, what are you doing?" And I said, "Man, I'm eating a lot of lamingtons. It's not, it's not good for my once perfect body." But Newt got me back involved in tennis through Optus and Tennis Australia. So I was kind of in a role, with them for 10 years. But nowadays, I'm working for an insurance company on their speakers bureau. So I go into, different like police stations, councils, corporate, talk about either motivational stuff or safety. But the last few years, I've actually written my autobiography. And man, funnily enough, it's going to be released next month through Amazon, and I called it Super Beast because I thought, man, you got to be a beast to kind of get to that, top echelon, that level. So, that book has been like a 5-year odyssey. I wrote it, rewrote it, wrote it again, 4 different drafts. Then it went off into the publishing wilderness, and then I decided to self-publish it. So I had to get an editor, lawyer, cover designer. But it's just been a labor of love to kind of delve back, in my own mind to all those great memories. But not only that, growing up, in a small beach town, and the night of the accident, and then discovering wheelchair tennis and where that took me. And so, and then all the Hall of Fame inductions, as well, which has been exciting. And then after the book, there'll be something else. Something else will spark my interest, and then I'll go in that direction. But that's the thing for me. Wheelchair tennis has been, such an incredible journey, and I would never have imagined, even when someone said, "Man, you should try wheelchair tennis," I would never have imagined where it could have taken me. And I think I just knew exactly what I wanted. I wanted to win tournaments, like Randy and like Laurent. I wanted to be world number one. I wanted to win gold, for me in Australia. And just the fact that I was able to do those things, wheelchair tennis was a perfect vehicle for me to kind of accomplish my goals and to kind of show what I was really capable of.
Well, you did that. I got to tell you, I've had a great time talking to you. Great conversation, and just wow. I mean, you just had so much water under the bridge that's gone so well for you, and just super happy that we got to catch up. David Hall, the most decorated wheelchair tennis player of all time. He's a Hall of Famer. Thanks, David.
Thanks, Bob. Cheers, mate.